Let's call this geopolitical chess. Was this anything close to a strategic win for Putin going into Syria and the way he's done?
I would say in the short term, this is definitely a strategic win for Putin, because as Assad's forces were increasingly depleted, he knew that in order for Russia to be part of any kind of political solution or transition in the Middle East, he had to act. And now he's put the US and its allies on the back foot. Russia is taking the initiative, and all of a sudden, the Western countries who for over a year have been trying to freeze Putin out of any kind of negotiation or talks, due to, of course, the Ukraine crisis, are forced all of a sudden to talk to Putin.
His international reputation, this is not going to do his international reputation any good at all. I would ask the question whether he actually cares. Should he care?
I don't think he cares. The interesting thing is that when when he first started launching the air attacks, or before, he wrapped this up as, you know, joining the fight against IS. And at that time, a lot of leaders, particularly European leaders, were warily kind of almost welcoming what he is doing, because of course Europe has been suffering under the migration crisis, the Syrian crisis. But it became very clear after the first airstrikes were launched that these were not targeting IS, but rather targeting groups closer to the heartland of Assad, so including forces which were backed by the Western allies.
So now we've got Western allies carrying out their own strikes, Russia carrying out their own strikes on opposite sides of the country almost. It's messy, and I would ask the question of you, how can we get to a place so that it's coordinated and not messy at all?
Well, that's going to be difficult. However, the West, even if they don't enter into an alliance with Russia, they can perhaps pressure Russia to at least put its pressure on Assad to at least stop some of the atrocities that are going on. So the barrel bombing, for example, could be one thing. However, I think it's very, very clear that the West now has to talk to Putin, and I think this is primarily what he wanted. He wanted the West to engage in talks with him, and also the focus has been, of course, taken off Ukraine.
The joint statement today by various countries, they're talking to him, they're saying, get out of Syria. When they meet in Paris today, the Merkels of this world, Hollande and Putin, take me into that room. What's Putin going to say to them? Well, what are they going to say to him?
Well, I think Merkel is, as always, going to play a very bridging role. This is also, you know, throughout the duration of the Ukraine crisis. And I think the US is going to be much harder, and I think the European leaders will try to at least come forward with some kind of mediating situation where perhaps Russia can play a role. They will insist, I think, on the Syrian government being involved in any kind of political transition. Perhaps Assad isn't their red line, and that may be acceptable to the Western allies if Putin is willing to give up Assad himself.
Last and very short question, the Endgame. Out of the two sides right now, the Russias of this world and the US, who has actually got a long-term strategic plan for the Middle East at the moment?
Well, obviously the West's strategy on the Middle East is in tatters, and I would argue that Russia's strategy, also there is no endgame. I would say that Putin's intervention is largely tactical, so he saw an opportunity and he moved in. I don't think he has a clear endgame either.
More mess. Nina Schick, analyst at Open Europe, thank you very much for joining us this morning.